I was surprised to learn that even like in Nigeria, there's a population of people who live there who don't speak, their tribal language. Why do you think that is?
Our dad told us that when he was in school, he would be beaten for speaking his native language in Nigeria.
So would you say the script is finally starting to flip now and that people are proud to speak? It looks like there are more people who are, I think like me, realizing that once my parents are gone, who's going to be teaching me Yoruba?
Yeah. I feel like sometimes people want to engage in the things that are kind of fun or easy, trending, but actually what is really going to like sustain our culture, sometimes we're not engaged in that.
A lot of the like professors that had done so much research about Yoruba culture, they were like all white, but I was just like, damn, like I don't know anything about these, and these people know so much.
I loved coming to the No Vernacular workshops that you all put on, and that's the opportunity to just speak Yoruba in a judgment-free zone.
People don't realize how much they're hindering the people that are really passionate, because so many people will come to us and say, I've been trying to speak to my mum, she's mocking me. People laugh at you. People don't create that safe space to learn. And I would encourage our generation to get used to seeing it as a language that we can speak together. We have to show that we are interested in actually learning the Yoruba words for things so that people make the effort to put it in.
What is the word for internet?
Ayélujára.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Cross Border, where we sit down with creators, industry experts, and entrepreneurs facilitating the global exchange of culture. Today, we are here with the Yorubaizms team, Tùmí, Tálè, and Aisha. Welcome.
Thank you. Welcome.
Well, I'm very excited to do this episode because, I've been to Yorubaizms, your community, twice now, and I just wanted to, first of all, could we start off by saying what exactly is Yorubaizm? Can you give us a background on the community that you've built?
So Yorubaizm is essentially a platform that's just designed to create products, services, events centered around the Yoruba language and culture. So that can, range from what we do, like our language clubs. We have spirituality events, we have lessons, we have the website, and we're just trying to build up to be a repository of knowledge and to create a community for people who are interested, whether they are Yoruba or not.
Wow. Thanks very much for that, Tùmí. So perhaps Tálè, what motivated you to start the community?
Yeah, we decided to start Yorubaizm because growing up in London, feeling a bit disconnected from the Yoruba culture, and we were fortunate enough to grow up speaking Yoruba in the household. Our parents made a conscious effort to speak Yoruba to us and to each other, and we were encouraged to speak it back. Our grandma also used to come some summers and would make a conscious effort to speak Yoruba to us. And, we'd be like 10 years old and she'd be like, no, reply in Yoruba. And we'd be like, Grandma, I don't know how to say that. She'd be like, try. And then eventually it just became a thing. And from watching Yoruba movies, listening to Yoruba songs, asking our parents, what does this line mean? It was just a part of the household.
Wow. Well, I mean, I know, so I grew up in Chicago, and I was born in Nigeria, grew up in Chicago, and, I had similarly, my mom at home, she would speak Yoruba to me, but back then, I would always reply to her in English. Back then, there was nothing cool about being Nigerian, and growing up in the U.S., we often, had all sorts of derogatory names for, Africans and what have you, and I think for me, one of the wildest things that I've seen is just seeing that complete 180 of how, Nigerian culture and Yoruba is kind of celebrated and cool now. Has that surprised you? Has that been shocking to you, or did you expect that?
I mean, I don't know if I would say I expected it or what I felt about it. Interestingly, I think that I have always been aware that it's not been cool in society. You can't escape that. But I've always been like, come on, man, you guys just need to catch up, because I've loved Afrobeats before Afrobeats was on. Like, we used to have the CDs. When I went to Nigeria, I remember when the band and stuff used to start performing in London, I was at every concert. I remember watching David O when he was singing on stage for his life. Before David O was David O, he was opening for D'banj and all of them when they were Mohits. And I remember watching him do Back When, and David O was dancing like, you know, the rent was due. Do you know what I mean? And I remember thinking that it's such a shame that we're being convinced. It's the same way that we're constantly convinced that our hair's not good, that our name, that we're like, our culture is not, you know, like there's something wrong with it. But I guess you're just waiting, you know, everything has its time, right? And you're just waiting for things to eventually for people to catch up, to know that what we have is lit.
So would you say all of you are fluent? Would you say you're fluent in Yoruba? Aisha, how?
I'm not fluent, no. I think there was a time that I was definitely, Yoruba was definitely getting better during like 2020. Like I did Yoruba in uni, so like that really did help.
Uni here?
Yeah, at SOAS. I actually picked Yoruba because I thought it was going to be an easy first. And that was a big mess up because, I mean, I did get a T1, but it wasn't as easy as I thought. Like, I think especially like with the tones and stuff like that really tripped me up. But yeah, my mum spoke Yoruba to me in the house, and also at the time she always used to love watching Nollywood. So I feel like that's actually how like I became like really familiar with the language. Yeah, from her speaking it to me and then just watching those movies in Yoruba. But yeah, my Yoruba is not that great, but we're trying.
Well, okay, so for a little bit of like context, I guess, for our viewers, can we just break it down? Like, what is Yoruba? Where is it spoken? Where's Yoruba land? Just give us a paint a little picture for us.
Mm-hmm. So I think if you ask most people, they would probably assume that Yoruba is largely spoken in Nigeria. And I guess that's probably where there's maybe the largest number of speakers. But actually, especially with colonialism and borders and things, it's actually from West Africa. And so you'll find a number of speakers from Nigeria, Benin, Togo, and maybe a few concentrations in other West African countries. And now, again, because of colonialism and the export and stuff, you also do get places like Brazil, Trinidad and Tobago, some places in Cuba and the Caribbean where you also find a population of Yoruba speakers.
That's actually really fascinating that you bring that up, because I think one of the first times I went to Brazil, I went to Salvador, Bahia. And that is where, you know, the other end, the transcontinental slave trade. And I was stunned at how similar the culture is. They were frying akara and things, and the things I was like, I was there for Carnival, so they have, you buy these tops, right? These matching tops and bottom, and they call them the abadas. I'm like, y'all know that. Y'all know an agbada comes from Nigeria, right?
Yeah.
Like, so I thought that was really, really fascinating. But yeah, it has been cool to see the transition from, you know, when I was, you know, people would ask me, you know, yeah, I'm Nigerian. I wasn't so proud, but now today I, you know, very proudly, you know, represent the Yoruba. I think one thing I'll guess say is that growing up in the U.S. versus, you know, now I've lived in London 3 years, Nigerian culture, Yoruba is very present here in London. And that's one of the things that motivated me to double down and start, you know, picking it up and learning it again. I guess, was it easier, I guess, to stay fluent and learn it, you know, with it, you know, around, or, I mean, just hearing it in the streets? I'm always hearing it on the auntie speaking it on the bus, or...
I feel like that's a big reason why I love South London, because like you can literally be on the bus and you're hearing somebody speak Yoruba and it's like, oh my God, Lagos, you know? And there's some sort of comfort it brings for me.
My experience of being a Londoner, and from my experience of maybe being in places like America, I think that your access to Yoruba foods, like you can have close, not ever like home, like being in Nigeria, but you can get a good amount of the same things that you could get in Nigeria here. And so I think some of the things that do create that proximity is actual proximity, like getting things from here versus in London versus the US, just that time, the distance and everything. I think even just for some people, if you went to churches, like there's churches that run the services in Yoruba. There's things that you can, you know, you have the hall parties, you would have concerts in the UK, and all of those things help to, I guess, facilitate that interest and create that closeness or allow you to still feel connected. But I do think that it depends on what you're talking about when you're saying connected, right? So if you're connected in terms of being aware of your culture and feeling like you're familiar with it, then that's one thing. But again, if you're hearing a language but never having the opportunity to speak in it or engage with it or learn more about it in a deeper way, then there's still going to be that gap, that disconnect. Yeah.
Well, actually, one of the things I was surprised to learn when I moved to London, as I was meeting more Africans, Nigerians here, but also who had a strong connection to Nigeria, is I was surprised to learn that even like in Nigeria, there's a population of people who live there who don't speak a native tongue. Yeah. They don't speak, their tribal language. Why do you think that is?
Well,
starts with C and rhymes with Polonium. No, but I think it's just like you're saying, it wasn't cool, and everybody is kind of looking to seem civilized, to seem, and when you speak Yoruba, if it's the only thing that you speak, some people might think that you're an illiterate or that you're not. There's a kind of, is it status symbol that comes with speaking English well, and if you're looking at a place that is still heavily affected by class, like the social class is so obvious when you're in a place like Nigeria. And I think, again, when we're in a society that's capitalist, a lot of people tie the utility or the value of something to what is my ROI in actual money. So if it's not a language that's spoken on a global scale, I'm not getting a job with it, I'm not using it. I hear people say that, what's my kid going to do with that? Why don't they just go and learn Mandarin and then they'll get a job, or learn French, they'll get a job? But I'm like, also, it depends on what you see value as. Because for me, I'm like, looking at the way our generation is right now, we're like maybe two generations from people being like, I think my grandma used to speak Yoruba. Yeah. I think, yeah, I remember, I recognize that. Do you know what I mean? And so to me, that's why it's important. But for some people, it's like, well, what am I going to do with it? So why bother?
And our dad told us that when he was in school, he would be beaten for speaking his native language in Nigeria. So I think that mindset also trickled down. You come back home and you're like, oh, I shouldn't be. Even in some people's households, it was like, don't speak Yoruba in the house, speak English so you can be smart or speak English well. So yeah, I think that's definitely been a product of colonialism.
I think that's actually why we called our event No Vernacular, because that was the rule. They would say no vernacular in school, and no vernacular is like the language. So they would say nobody should speak their native language in school, to kind of encourage that. And I know for a lot of parents who moved here, and I don't blame them, they come to a new country, you're starting a new life, you want to assimilate as best as possible, and you think the best thing to do is not to confuse the kids. Just let them learn English, let them go to school, let them do well. Don't bring all that Yoruba mumbo jumbo into the household. Let them just learn the English and do well in society. And so I think now a lot of parents are realizing that wasn't actually the case, and it's a bit late.
Too late. Yeah.
Honestly, I think one of the biggest gifts that my parents gave me, my mom especially, is the ability to speak Yoruba and just the proximity that I have to my culture. Growing up, like I said, growing up in America, I don't even know how she managed to do it. Was obviously working all the time, but I guess she was always speaking Yoruba. And if it's like, if you don't understand, well, then you're not eating. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's crazy because my dad said that one time he had us on the tube, and this lady was like, what are you doing speaking that to them? Like, it's gonna, like, you will regret it when they can't speak properly, blah, 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 like a stranger. And he was like, he was like, if he wasn't confident that it was something he really was passionate about doing, he was like, I would have stopped. Because the way that woman really gunned him down, like, what are you doing? And he was just like, well, whatever happens, they're going to learn it in school, they're going to learn it in society. So it was really important to him. But he was like, the pushback that you would get from people, he was like, was really crazy.
I just wanted to touch on what you said earlier about, status symbols, and just like thinking about like in Nigeria, like when people mock people for how they sound, or like when people start putting like a sort of English accent, and then people are like, people start mocking them, or even like when musicians from like Nigeria, like is it who is it that they Wizkid, they
when it's 24 June
they come for Wizkid a lot, and they start mimicking accents and stuff. So it's just interesting to see like how those hierarchies and stuff still exist today, and how like sounding British and like having an American accent is just posited.
And I guess even touching back to that as well is like probably the reason why the British presence is more obvious in Nigeria. It's just like the Commonwealth, right? Like people grew up with that. People like our grandparents used to come to the UK and go back when they were younger, so they were familiar with the UK. They knew London, whereas I don't know if there's that much closeness to the US then.
I mean, I'll say there are a lot of big, strong pockets of Nigerians across the US.
Yeah,
Texas, Houston,
hear
Atlanta,
about that.
New York,
Maryland.
Chicago, Maryland. I have cousins, all these places. But
I feel like they're everywhere these days. Because I'll be hearing people say that there's a community of them in Russia. I'm like, Russia?
In Tokyo. Even. So would you say the script is finally starting to flip now and that people are proud to speak? Because, I mean, just looking at the turnout in your vernacular classes, it looks like there are more people who are, I think like me, realizing that once my parents are gone, who's going to be teaching me Yoruba?
Yeah.
How am I going to be
I think
learning?
that's what's like that fear is really starting to drill in for people, and they're like, I need to take matters into my own hands.
100%. So now I'm really learning from the likes of communities like yours, but honestly, WizKid, the Afrobeats artists, Ashake, who Burna Boy, who are producing music in Yoruba, I think are really contributing to that flip of the script.
You can see it. It's happening. People are saying it. You have people that are like, my name was Sean, I was saying I was Sean. Like all of these things where people were having to, because it was bad. Like it was really like
they were calling us derogatory names.
Yeah.
African booty scratcher was one of them. I got in America.
Y'all had some crazy.
It's true. This guy used to call me immigrant in school. Yeah, I'm like, what? Like,
I felt like I started seeing the switch also around like 2020 as well, because I feel like people are starting to think about like the impacts of like colonialism. Everyone was in there reading this. People are really thinking about
indoors, girl. That's the only thing we could do.
People were in there reading, and I think people had started sort of having conversations about decolonization.
One question I have, I suppose, is just on the practicalities of Yoruba. How easy or difficult on a scale of 1 to 10 do you think it is for someone to learn Yoruba?
What would you guys say?
I feel passionately about this.
I know I've seen you teach though.
I feel like there's already kind of a mindset about like Yoruba, like people be like, it's so hard. And I'm like, the thing that makes it hard is the lack of familiarity and probably the lack of access to resources. Like English is not an easy language at all. But because you're surrounded by it and because you need it, it's like necessity is the mother of all invention, right? You will find a way to learn it. Yoruba in terms of its grammar structure, in terms of many aspects of it, is not that hard, the phonetic, but you just need to become familiar with it. And nobody can expect to have this to sound like a native speaker of a country if you're not from there. But the things that you always have to do sometimes when you're learning a different language, Yoruba, whatever language you're learning, is you will not always be able to translate things directly. And so you need to accept any new language for what it is. The tonal aspect of it is something that you need to grasp, and it can be difficult to get it if you're not a native speaker, and especially if you don't have any familiarity for what you're trying to mimic. But I don't think it's that difficult for if you're trying to go.
Okay, so now I want you to introduce yourself to me in Yoruba.
Okay, kilo fe kin so.
Okay, sọ fún mi níbo ló ti bí ẹ.
Wọ́n bí mi níbí ní ìlú London.
Okay, àti wọn náà Aisha, kilo dé. What's up?
What be me ìlú Nigeria?
Okay.
Lagos.
Cool. Oh, girl, you know that.
So, Tálè.
èmi náà wọ́n bí mi sí ìlú London.
Okay. Ó dà bẹ́ẹ̀. Ẹ ṣé. Kò tọ́pẹ́. I like that one. Oh, good.
Also, I just wanted to add, like, Yoruba is very descriptive, and a lot of the time words are made up of other words. So, like, even colors, for example, brown is color of a tree. So, green is color of a leaf. So, it's quite like
Poetic.
Yeah,
poetic.
That's what I was gonna
very,
say.
so like awiki and stuff like that. Yeah, it's just, I think that makes it a lot easier. So you can see a word, you might not know it, or someone might say a word, but if you break it down, you're like, oh, like school is house of books, iliwe. So if you didn't know school, but you knew books.
So how did you find your initial community members?
If you feel like you need something, there's probably other people that need it too. And so when we were feeling like this, we just were like, we know that we're not the only ones. And I think the first event that we actually did was at SOAS, which is the School of Oriental and African Studies. So our first event was looking at what is Yoruba spirituality, because I think also I see a lot of people, you know, talking about Ashe, Oshun and all this kind of thing. So we were like, you know what, let's have a space to have the event. And a few students from SOAS were really interested. They were like, okay, you've got the space, blah, blah, blah. And I remember that day was mad because it was raining. Like, it was raining like crazy. We were like, this is a free event. People have no obligation to come, but the room was packed.
It was really
and at the end of the day, we were like, it's a weekday, we need to go home, like, you know. And that's when we were like, okay, people are really wanting to learn and be engaged and interested in this.
At that time as well, I felt like there was quite a large shift of people moving away from Christianity or Abrahamic religions. And sometimes when we talk about, because we grew up practicing Yoruba spirituality, people be like, oh, tell me more and stuff.
What is Yoruba spirituality?
Ifa. Yeah. I mean, we grew up also in the church. So we got to see like both.
What is Ifa?
Ifa is the
Miti Gbonyeri.
Gbonyeri.
Go tell Miti Gbonyeri.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, how much time you got? Because like, it's basically, I guess people often call it the African Information Retrieval System, because actually it's not really a religion. It's not of a way of life. It's a culture, and there is religion in it. There's science in it. There's poetry in it. There's all sorts in it. And I guess the way that it works is that you there's a divination system, which is actually based on the binary system of 0 and 1, and you use it to essentially understand the way of life. And I think the same way as most spiritualities or most belief systems, it's just your way of understanding the divine, your way of understanding the world around you through your cultural lens.
Wow. I think I'd have a little bit of research to do on that.
You have fun, bro. It's very expensive, man.
Very.
Yeah.
And I think people don't realize how much we are already kind of still practicing. 100%. So like from naming ceremonies to, you know, weddings, we've lost a bit of that spiritual element, but we've still, a lot of our practices would fall under Yoruba spirituality, but people don't realize. Yeah. And I think, we were quite passionate about putting it out there, because growing up in the church and also practicing Yoruba spirituality, I would be quite confused because people would be like, oh, you're a devil worshipper, da da da. And I'm like, this is so interesting and fun, and like people you don't even actually know about it, but you've just got this automatic
bias.
Yeah, you know, based on like.
And what was crazy is we would have people coming from Cuba, coming from Brazil, coming from like around the world to come and learn, and who were so interested and passionate. And then it was like the actual Nigerians or the Yoruba people who have access to it were the ones like shunning it the most.
That was the sad thing. I remember when I was like in SOAS again. Sorry, I'm just gonna bring up SOAS a lot. Sorry, but like a lot of the like professors that had done so much research about Yoruba culture, they were like all white and stuff, and like they were like proper knowledgeable and stuff. And I think for me that was also another thing that was just like really sad to me, because I was like, they were like putting me onto things I never knew, like, and I was like, nah, this is kind of sad, because obviously like it's great that they're learning, and I don't, you know, like they're so like enthusiastic and so passionate that it's not giving like
appropriation. Yeah.
But I was just like, damn, like I don't know anything about these, and these people know so much. Like, if it just continues going like this, like, then where's the knowledge going to be at? It's not going to be on the, what's it called?
Yeah. Going back to what you were saying earlier, when you were like, do you feel the flip of the switch or the script of the switch? I beg.
The flip of the kidney.
You know what I'm trying to say. You know what I'm trying to say. But again, for me, like you're saying, it's like, okay, what are we flipping to? Because it's like, okay, we know Ashake lyrics, we know that you like jollof rice, whatever. We were going back to Lagos for Dirty December, but tangibly, practically, what is the flip of the switch? What is actually happening? What does this mean for our communities? Because even when you look at things like, for example, people say this about reggae music, all right? It's like, what has that done for the community or for the people. And I mean, not everything has to be like, you know, activism or blah, 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 blah. But I'm just like, sometimes I think that we can be a bit, maybe a bit
Surface
short-sighted or
level.
surface level in how we're actually thinking about it, and not, you know, we need to zoom out and actually look at, okay, you now wearing a dashiki or whatever, or being able to do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because even now people are saying, oh, I might give my child a Yoruba middle name, but like they're going to have a biblical first name. And, you know, I understand religion is important to some people, but I just feel like, you know, that is a huge part of our identity. And it's just like, now, if you meet somebody and you know, like, you see their name, you kind of, it starts a conversation. And I feel like that is the same way we've almost we haven't lost our religion, but they tried to strip that away from us. It's like you're stripping away your own identity by not even wanting to give your children Yoruba first names. And I'm personally just passionate about that. And sometimes I feel like people want to engage in the things that are kind of fun or easy, trending, but actually what is really gonna like sustain our culture, sometimes we're not engaged in that.
But then it's easy also to say that people aren't engaged in it, but I have to be honest, one of the things that made me want us to start a platform like this is that, like you said, where are we going to get this information from?
Mm-hmm.
So again, like, you can't expect people to engage or not have access, but you can't expect people to be having a conversation about something they don't even know exists. Do you know what I mean? It's like you saying you didn't know about it. So how can I expect you to engage with it? How can I expect you to understand it? So for me, one of the important things is making it accessible to people, making it something that people know to then be interested in. And what I love about the community that we're building is that from then being able to have those conversations, you can then go and do your research and you can focus on the thing that you're interested in. So many people will be like, I've never even known the Yoruba alphabet. I've never even known how we pronounce words. I don't even know these things. And it inspires somebody to then you go off and
I had never seen the Yoruba alphabet until I came to your class.
Wow. Yeah.
And honestly, that moment when you guys explained the accents, do, re, mi, that dispelled so much decades of confusion. I was like, wow, that really put structure into the language. And to your point, I think we need more. If anything, I feel as though, and maybe I live in a bubble, but I feel like for me, the script is already flipped. Like when I meet someone who is a fluent English speaker and they speak Yoruba or Igbo or they speak, I'm like, wow, that is impressive, because you've almost been able to defy all these conventions, defy everything that's stripping your culture away from you, and actually you've sought that education. So to me, being able to speak English plus or your native plus is, if anything, almost now that's the status symbol to me.
Definitely.
I love that. But do you know what? I think for me, it's on one hand it's impressive, but also it's like sad. Because there's so many communities. I think also growing up, there were so many communities. I felt like a lot of my friends, maybe from Asian communities and other things, they like that was the norm. That was like the standard. Do you know what I mean? They went to schools sometimes on Saturdays where they had language schools, cultural schools, and I'm like, we find it impressive if we can even understand the language. And I'm like, that's sad to me.
Yes, but I mean, the fault is, I mean, not to
it's
blame,
not to be putting fingers, but I'm just saying, there's a lot of factors that have made it that way. But again, that's why for me, when I was like, okay, this is how you feel about it, do something. As opposed to being like, they're sad, like rather than waiting 20 years to see what happens. That's why for me it was important to be like, okay, I see what's happening, I see where this is going. What do we do? What can you do?
So I loved coming to the No Vernacular workshops that you all put on, and that's the opportunity to just speak Yoruba in a judgment-free zone. Some of the feedback I've heard talking to people, other people who have attended is, I don't get the opportunity to just practice. I can listen. And actually a lot of people say, oh, I understand it, but I don't speak it. And that's such a common issue we all have. And that's kind of what I love, about the space you've created, is that opportunity to just practice. And for everyone thinking about going, just go because
we didn't pay him.
Yeah, just go because
Hashtag ad.
yeah, no, they didn't pay, but like it's just you think, oh, I can't even say anything. Well, they break you up into different levels for people who can barely speak. So no pressure. It's a really low pressure environment, which is why I really like it. So so I guess my question is, what are tips for people who have that kind of understanding of it, but they can't speak it? What are some practical tips for success?
Yeah. I think we're in a day and age where, like, I'm sorry, there's no excuse when there's YouTube there. There's so many people, like EA Yoruba, so many resources. Just like watch films, listen to music, even just to hear how things are pronounced. Even if you don't understand, it's really good. Also, if you're, you have your parents around or grandparents, aunties, ask them questions, ask the meaning of things. Yeah, just be really inquisitive and also challenge yourself, because I think so many people think they can't speak and then they start and they're like, oh, they surprise themselves, because I'm like, deep down it's in there, but because you don't challenge yourself or give yourself enough credit, you're not bringing it out. And once you start, the hardest part is always starting, but yeah, utilize as much as possible.
Yeah. I would say that's definitely the first step. If you're somebody who's in a household where it's spoken, tap into whatever is available to you. I think like with everything, it has to be a bit of a commitment. Like if you're actually really keen to do it, it's like sometimes you start and then it's just easier to revert back to English if you're having a conversation with people that you're familiar with having a conversation with, but it has to be a little bit of a commitment. And the thing that I say to everybody every single time is the best person that learns a language is probably a child. Yeah, because they will be embarrassed. You won't tell a child you said that wrong, and then the next day the child's like, I'm never speaking English again. They're going to go back out there, they're going to get back up, they're going to speak again, they're going to make mistakes. They're not afraid of how they sound, they just go for it. And I think that you have to do that. It's like I say to people, if you learn how to drive on YouTube, you're doing it virtually, you've never gotten a car, girl, you will never drive that car. You need to if you understand the language and your issue is speaking, you have to speak. That's it. Because people want to ask about what billion resources they can use. The first one, you have to just get out there and do it. But there are really good resources like Tálè was saying, YouTube, there's a few podcasts. I think just type it in Google, type it in TikTok.
Social media,
like
type it, you will find so many stuff. Come to us for lessons if you want. Don't come to us, there's other platforms. Like go anywhere you want to go, but there are resources. And I think when like you start to see your parents aging, you start to see your grandparents aging, realize that your resources are
some of the best resources.
Some of the best resources.
Free resources.
But I also am going to speak to those resources as well. This is my point to them, is that people don't realize how much they're hindering the people that are really passionate, because so many people will come to us and say, I've been trying to speak to my mum, she's mocking me. People laugh at you. People don't create that safe space to learn. And I see people making YouTube videos or TikTok videos and they're trying their best, and there's the Nigerians in the comments like, which type of Yoruba is person they speak? And it's like like, come on man, like give them a try. Do you know what I mean? So it's like sometimes I will laugh at, there's a little kiki like, girl, what the hell you say? But at the same time, it's like we can do this in a part jokey way, part supportive way, to be like, hey, maybe you didn't quite say that there, but it's a process, it's a journey, and we've all been, for a lot of people, you've actually just been robbed of this opportunity, and you're trying to reconnect, you're trying to relearn, and then people are just like making it difficult for you. So I would also say that to all of us, and I would encourage our generation to get used to seeing it as a language that we can speak together, because I think most of us are used to hearing it as like a language of instruction, maybe a language of insult, and I think that sometimes people feel like they're cosplaying an auntie or an uncle when they speak it, because you're not used to because you're not used to seeing that as a language
so natural sometimes.
No,
it does, but I'm saying that's the next step as well.
It's very sexy,
bruh, it's a language of love. It's a poetic language. And so my big thing that I would also encourage people is to see it as a language that we speak to each other comfortably, not as a joke. Because sometimes people speak Yoruba and it's like, you're laughing. I'm like, you didn't actually say anything funny, but you just find it funny that you're speaking Yoruba to me. And I think that's what we also will have to get to, the point of our generation, where we don't see it as like, I speak it to my mum. Because people say I want to pass it on to my child. But I'm like, if you're not comfortable speaking that language at home with your partner, where do you think that is randomly going to come that you speak it to your child, So that's the other thing that I would say. Let's normalize talking to each other as much as we can, and supporting each other to learn to.
It's facts on the parents' point. When I made the decision that I was going to double down and invest in, improving my speaking ability, I said it to my family. So I mean, that put them in the mindset. That was like, oh wow, you know, they had never expected that or experienced that. So I drew, you know, I said, listen, I'm gonna be, you know, my teachers are Ashake, my teachers are Burna Boy and Yorubaisms. Thank you. And honestly, my parents, they've been a little surprised. My mom has really been.
Also, when you give them that stubborn goat head and you keep going,
in
and
Yoruba
like,
too,
and you're like, no, I told you I was doing this, and I'm really trying. And sometimes my mom gets stressed because again, so many of the words we use are in English, and I'll be like, Mom, how'd you say this? And she's like, listen, I don't know that one, because now it's like, girl, you put me to the test, but I'm like, do you know what? We can all learn together, because even. Interestingly, recently there's this show, I don't know if you've heard of it, Masoyimbo.
I love that.
Yeah, which basically sees no speaking English. And it's actually become like an interesting sometimes activity for us to do with our parents who watch the show. And sometimes they're looking at us like, I think there was a word like calendar the other day, and Tálè got it, and my parents were like, girl, how you know that? Do you know what I mean? And it's nice. So just looking for new ways. And it's also for some people, what they've said is like, it's a new way for them to engage with their parents. It's a new way for you to engage with people around you, because it's a journey that you're going on together. It's a rediscovery. It's maybe something that they haven't had the chance to like express or learn, or even just asking them like, what was your reasons behind not teaching me, or like, what was it like for you to learn it in for some of them that learn it in schools.
One of the things about that show Masoyibo is it's made me realize how deeply embedded English was in the Yoruba language. Has become like, you know, we didn't even certain things like Yoruba, it's just accepted that we use the English word in Yoruba for that.
Like
whereas excuse me?
Like sa.
Exactly. Yeah, even something like that. So I think that show has given me the appreciation that actually there is a word in Yoruba for that. So find that word. And actually when we went to the last class y'all had, we talked about the internet. What is the word for internet?
Ayélujára.
Ayélujára.
But this is one thing that I say, and my voice is coming Yoruba, because again, it's like even you'll go online and you'll say, what's the word for internet? And they'll say interneti. But there are words for this stuff. And, you know, again, and I feel like we have to show that we are interested in actually learning the Yoruba words for things, so that people make the effort to put it in. Because one of the things that I get frustrated with watching Yoruba films, I'm like, why are you saying all of this? You know, they're like, honey, I'll makbe later. It's like, we all know the word for later. Why are you, this is a Yoruba film. If I wanted to watch an English film, I'd put an English film on. And it's just annoying that even the things that are meant to be our resources are putting so much English in it as well. So I think, we have to make the effort to actually know that there are words for things and look for things and make the effort to use them as well.
And also people are like, oh, this word doesn't exist in Yoruba. One, without actually finding out whether that's true. And two, also remembering like the word internet didn't exist in the English language until it was created. You know, we can also create words, and people need to get used to that.
Language is dynamic. It's not. The things that existed at the beginning of Yoruba will have to adapt.
I mean, English is also evolving. I think words like Riz, there's a word a new word every year. So you know, Yoruba, it's natural for to expect a language to evolve as well. So
one of my favorite Yoruba words is aworo.
TV.
What is it?
Yeah, I think it's
maybe you're talking about TV or
photograph.
Photograph.
Yeah, aworo. And then TV is I find that so fun.
How do you say it?
I find that such a
because
fun.
It's not television.
This is to speak what it means. It's because so we put sound with image. That's television.
That's why I love that word.
So it's television.
Wow. Okay. We can get it. Yeah, just take some practice. I guess just to wrap things up, you made a good point about, you know, ownership, you know, and on another episode we talked about, you know, this African Renaissance, you know, that we're seeing in a new age, you know, of the just celebration of African culture. How do we maintain ownership and ensure that, you know, we're not, you know, seeing the same sort of exploitation that we've been seeing over the past centuries of African culture?
And when you mean exploitation, is that from outsiders?
Yes, from outside. Because also when you think about it, for instance, just Afrobeats music, right? Like thinking about like they're singing songs and performing in Yoruba, but obviously the West wants a cut of that, right? Record labels want a cut of that, you know. So how do we balance that, you know, that balance that, yes, sharing our culture with the world, but also retaining that ownership and agency over it? It's a tough one, I feel.
It is.
It is. I don't have all the answers, but I would say it's definitely two things for me that spring to mind when I initially think of it. And my first one is that we need to actually calm down with how excited we get about other people being interested in our culture. Like when Black people do ballet, people who own ballet are not like, wow, amazing, sensational. They're gatekeeping it. And I'm not saying that's what they should be doing, but look at the Williams sisters in tennis. Yeah. People weren't like, oh my gosh, these Black people are conquering a sport that's been predominantly not had Black women in it. That's not what they're doing. Do you know what I mean? And I'm not saying that that's the way it should be, but it's like your child has come to you speaking Yoruba and is making the attempt to right your wrong, and you're mocking them. And then you'll see some video that's been forwarded 400 billion times on YouTube of some Sally speaking the worst Yoruba you've ever heard, and everybody's like, wow, amazing. People,
Kaya, did you see that?
Yeah, and I'm just like, you not need to really get a real serious grip, because when you are proud of, like, it's like the other day when people were saying to Ashake, now that you're blowing, maybe you should stop using so much Yoruba. And I loved it. Ashake was like, if you F with me, my Yoruba, F with me. If you don't, you don't. Because, like, what is that? It's so tapped. Do you know what I mean? This is the thing that made him blow. And we need to be proud that what we have is good, and we need to, like, hold on to it. But I also think there needs to be genuine care, and, like, we all need to kind of be on the same page about wanting who it's in the hands of. Because sometimes I think we're a little bit dishonest about the exploitation, because the exploitation is not just happening outside of our communities if we're keeping it real. Yeah. And it's not always to blame, but I'm thinking, you know, you're a young boy from Isaleko, like downtown Lagos, you have nothing to your name, a music label comes to you offering you more money than your whole family's ever seen. And someone's like, think about the future generations of Afrobeats artists. Girl,
my friend, get in that
studio. Take several seats. So I think we also need to start having, like, these conversations with all the people that are involved about how we actually create incentives for these things to be nurtured and remain in the community. And what that looks like, because sometimes people even say, you know, ultimately, if two people offer me an offer, I'm going for the best offer, no matter what skin color, community, blah, 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 that person comes from.
I think in addition to that, it means embracing the culture beyond December.
That's right. And and weddings, you know, and wearing a gilly.
Exactly.
Yeah. I feel like we haven't actually gone, apart from, like, sort of like Afrobeats and stuff and the food and stuff, we haven't actually even gone deep enough, really. Like, majority of people, like...
The other day I was when people talking about water baths and all these kind of things, it's like people are essentially going back to what we used to do ages and ages and ages ago. We're like, there's nothing new under the sun, right? But we don't even know for most of us what going back even looks like, because we don't know what we've had or what has existed. And some of the times it's because we've constantly been told that we didn't have anything, or that what we were doing wasn't good, and we were lucky to have been given civilization and be in the age that we're in.
I think we still unearthing and stuff, and it's always just so interesting. I feel like there's always, like, new things that I'm learning and stuff. I've been seeing how external actors have actually been somehow, like, helpful, because even in, like, what's it called, Nigerian stuff, like, for example, craft and stuff is dying out. I think in Ikiti, there was a couple of missionaries that went back to Ikiti and helped in terms of, like, wood carving and stuff, because the what's it called practice was dying out. And so then the wood carvers started, like, depicting Christian scenes and stuff, and that actually helped the practice grow. And even, like, for someone like Susan Wenger, this white woman that went to
the house in Ocean.
Yeah, literally, she restored like that Ocean Grove and stuff. So I find the conversation about keeping him, it's really interesting.
It is interesting, and that's why I'm like,
you can't do it alone.
The conversations are nuanced, and that's why I think it's, again, like I keep saying, it's like networking across, and not just looking to only work upwards in terms of who's going to help, but, like, even just, like, these kind of conversations and whoever is in your space. But, like, again, just to speak to that, is that two things can be true at the same time. Because I'm not the biggest fan of some of the stuff that Samuel Ajayi Crowther did when he translated the Yoruba Bible, but it's one of the best texts. Is that true? But it's one of the biggest texts that's been fully translated into pure Yoruba, although it's done a lot of damage.
The energy.
But
if you had more people putting that kind of energy into translations and text like that,
when it's not
it would be great.
We need more people owning the narrative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was gonna also add, sorry, I'm really interested in culture. Like, culture is not static, and like even when we're talking about like sort of, you know, embracing our culture and stuff, like we're not. It's also not like a romanticism of the past. Like we're in a new time, you know, path.
Get
like,
rid of the bits that
literally,
you don't like,
things
and
that
change
don't
it,
work
switch it
and
up.
stuff.
Every culture does
yeah.
it, you know, and that's why sometimes I even not reject, but I get uncomfortable with when everything that is Yoruba is called traditional.
Yeah.
Because it makes it feel like it has to be old or in the past. But if you look at the outfits that we wear for the weddings now,
They've updated,
they've changed, you know, there's new gilly styles.
Yeah.
And so we can look at how we still embrace what is indigenous to us and move it forward and reinvent it, yeah. But I think, again, we have to have a conversation about whether that reinvention is just making it more palatable.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because sometimes people make these Ashobi now and I'm like, girl,
It's so tight.
that is just,
I'm breathing.
you just used traditional material on a westernized dress. And there was this I really can't remember her name, but there's this girl on TikTok that's like, actually, what I want to be doing is looking at how we actually are modernizing the styles with different materials, with like Western materials, as opposed to just...
Oh, I think I saw that TikTok.
Yeah, I can't remember her name now.
Was it like she did one with tartan or something?
Yeah, but like, you know, I just think sometimes when we're talking about the reinvention and we're talking about this, I'm like, is it a reinvention or is it a westernized version of our cultures? Because slapping a Yoruba name on your brand and then it has nothing to do with any engagement with the culture is like, okay.
What good is that doing?
Yeah, like, you know.
People love that one, though.
Yeah.
They love slapping the Yoruba name on
and
anything,
I see the name
bro.
of the thing and I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool. But I don't, yeah. That's,
I love it for them.
Yeah. You know?
Wow. Well, thank you for your insights. You know, I think there's a lot there. There's a lot we can be doing. I think it starts with, you know, just starting to speak, like you all said, just, you know, speaking the language and taking ownership of it. I think for what I'm hearing is we all, you know, I'm definitely, you know, and a lot of my family members have been taken aback about how much I've, you know, dived in and, you know, but I feel like, you know, it's really now or never. I don't want it to end with me. You know, I'm very invested. Yeah, I love my culture. And, you know, I really thank you all for the work that you're doing to build community around it. I think it's really having an impact, definitely for me and for the people that I've seen attend your No Vernacular workshops. I think it's really a big value add. So Tùmí, Tálè and Aisha, thank you so much for being on the Cross Border podcast. Thank you all for tuning in. It's been a pleasure having these guests today. I can tell we're very excited. Be sure to give us a follow and subscribe and like. So we'll see you next time on Cross Border.